I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today we're talking with Grammy Award-winning producer and engineer Matt Ross-Spang. So stay with us for part one of a two-part conversation with Matt, and of course a special thanks to our sponsor, Treasevant Manor. Matt, thanks for having us in your studio.
Thanks for coming.
This is so cool in here. Like, we've got photos on the website that people can go and see.
Yeah.
I won't dwell too much trying to describe where we are, but we'll talk about it as we talk. We're here in Crosstown in Southern Groove's studio.
Absolutely, yeah.
Congratulations. You
Thank
won
you.
some more Grammy Award-winning again recently.
Yeah.
And does that make you uncomfortable on some level?
A little bit. You know, you never go into it thinking that's even a possibility, and then I'm never good about compliments or talking about myself, so it always gets weird when I'm still not used to it, so when that phrase comes up,
Yeah, but it's great. It's hard not to mention because it's amazing. You know, I mean, in this studio and the folks you've been able to work with and albums and projects you've worked on, which we'll kind of walk through that for people who aren't as familiar with your work. But we're in your studio here in Crosstown, and you're a producer and engineer. For people who don't know, who maybe see in the old days on the liner notes or they see it in an article in Daily Memphian, a music producer does what?
Well, it changes too, so that's a good question because, traditionally you think of a producer like George Martin, Phil Spector, Sam Phillips. So, Sam would get an artist in and then try and get them to be this themselves. That was his goal as a producer. Pull something out of you didn't know you had in you. Then you have someone like George Martin who is arranging string. He's writing, arrangements of the string parts for, Eleanor Rigby or something. So he's a little bit more involved than Sam. Sam was musically talented, but he wasn't writing a lot of arrangements as far as I know. And George was conducting and doing all these other things. Then you have Phil Spector who, would wave a pistol around and wouldn't let you leave and make you do 80 takes till you got what you wanted. And they all were successful. I don't do a lot of those things. I do some of those things, but
the pistol. Where are you on the pistol?
I don't bring pistols anywhere.
Okay, good to know.
I kill them with kindness usually, but I view myself somewhere in between all those, and it's different between. It varies depending on the song and the artist. And song by song, some songs an artist has, you don't want to touch them. You want to stay out of the way. You just want to capture it. Some songs you can tell there's a great idea there, but you got to explore and find out what really needs to be. So there's case by case, you're doing more or less as a producer. And then if a producer in rap genre is a lot of times the guy who's making the beat. There's not necessarily a guy arranging a string part. It's more like the beat maker and stuff like that. So depending on the genre, it can be all kinds of things, more or less roles. But typically the producer, you are kind of in charge of the overall project. So you oversee a lot of times the budget, the players. If you're picking players, you're helping the artist pick the songs, doing the arrangements, picking the studio, picking everyone involved. You're the direct contact then with like the label or the managers trying to make the vision. It's all in your hands. You're the director, the movie director in a sense.
Yeah.
And so you see the project all the way through in that regard.
Through to so many things to talk about, but through to the marketing and the promotion, or is there a handoff at that point to the label and the artist, and you're sort of hoping everything goes well from there?
Usually once the record's done recording, you're called in for like press stuff or quotes and stuff. But yeah, usually some producers I know have marketing ideas, and a lot of times I've had labels ask me like, what's this record mean to you, to try and get a sense, because they all need a story, right, to push around each record. I've had occasionally a couple ideas on marketing or something that I've suggested, but it's funny to me because I don't know if it's just you're too close to a record at some point, and I always pick I love the sad song that makes you cry over like the dancing song. Right. So it's always funny to me when a record comes out and what singles they choose for radio versus the one I think is like, this is going to knock you off your butt, but they want to play the fun dance one. So there's always, I feel like a disconnect with me because I'm just going for the emotional core of whatever we went for instead of like the commercial side of it. So I'm probably not the best person for that anyways.
you're also engineer. Is that how you, like, how did you come to this? To be a producer and to own your own studio and to be working with, I mean, we should say some of the folks that you've worked with. I mean, Jason, well, I'm going to do a bad job of it, but like Jason Isbell, Serena Wages, who's a friend of the show, who's been on a couple of times. That's where we first met, was a listening lab thing. And her album, I think, came out a couple days ago, actually, the full album. You've worked on Al Green projects. You've worked on Elvis reissue kind of projects. Who I forgot a lot of people, but name some more of the people. And then how did you come to be where you are right now?
It's been just a lot. Lucky to work with all these people. Like John Prine was definitely like a big influence on me, and I got to work with him. Paul Thorne, Margot Price, and we kind of started together in a sense.
Mountain Goats,
Scott, Megan's got a band Dr. Dolly I work with, but also he started a side project with Greg Cartwright called The Hypos, which is a new project I'm really excited about. We've done a lot together. I'm so bad at naming people.
No, and we'll mention more as we go. And again, it's two parts, so we'll talk a bunch and we'll talk more. But again, back to my original question, just how did you come to do this? You're a musician, at least in part, or not? Or,
I started playing guitar when I was about 11, and I'm by no means a child prodigy, no music talent in the family. They would be fine with me saying that. And I picked up the guitar, but it became like a puzzle to me. Up until then, it was basketball. I love basketball. Picked up the guitar, never really put it down. It's that thing of like you play till your fingers bleed, and then you keep playing all these things. And I was never very good, but my guitar teacher was cool. His name was Mike Love. And he didn't say, let's learn music theory. He just said, pick out 10 songs you want to learn guitar. And if we get through those 10, we can see where your head's at. Yeah. So I picked, like Secret Agent Man and whatever else. Started playing guitar. And I never cared to learn the music theory side of it. I still don't. To me, that's like, once, like a magic trick is amazing until they explain how they did it. And then it's like stupid. That's how... That's how I kind of view music. I want it to still be magical to me. Yeah. So, that's my cool answer for being lazy. But I've never bothered to learn music theory. But I played guitar. Never really was interested in learning other people's songs. I just wanted to be able to play. And then I immediately began to try to write my own stuff. And then I played with other people. Never was in like a big band or anything at first. And then about 14 years old, me and this guy had played a little bit together with acoustic guitars, and we worked up a couple of covers. We just liked playing at the house. And my parents bought us 2 hours of studio time at Sun Studio. My cousins were the managers, and back then it was $50 an hour, 2 hour minimum, so you could cut at 6 o'clock at night. So for my birthday, they bought us 2 hours. My dad drives us down there, and I meet James Lott, who had been the engineer there about 25 years, and he was everything you'd want him to be. He wore a beret. He cussed like a sailor. He smoked, probably drank a little bit, but he treated us like we deserved to be there. And it was the most amazing experience. And the other guy I was with at the time, he cut the song, and then he got bored, and he just took a nap on the floor while we finished it. But I was watching James do everything, and he was just so gracious to me. And he said, you should come back and intern sometime. And so when I was 16 and I started being able to drive, my cousins who were the managers at Sun offered me a job there as a tour guide. They had an opening spot for a tour guide. So after high school, drive to Sun, I'd give tours to the tourists till 6:30 at night. Then I'd start interning in the studio, and I interned with James for a long time. Then I became the second engineer, and then I basically led sessions on my own. By like 18, I was heading sessions on my own. We tag team stuff. Then he retired in 2010. I became the head engineer, and I also became the operations manager at Sun. So it was really, those were long, the few years I did that was long days. It was 80 or 90 hour weeks easily, but I love what I was doing. And then I left in 2015. And long story short, make a long story long, I was just the engineer at Sun. A lot of people didn't know.
Which means what, though? So just the engineer doesn't, 80 to 90 hours a week is more than just something.
Well, that was, so I was the operations manager. So for every day I get there at 9, open the studio up for the tourists, and I manage the employees, and give tours, run the business till 6, close the register down, count the money. Then the band would show up, and I'd record the band till who knows when. Yeah. And then rinse and repeat. As a recording engineer, the band comes in, you're not necessarily the producer, so you're not necessarily in charge of like dictating all these things, but you are in charge of the sound of the record. And you're also the person making a lot of sonic decisions, which can lead to creative decisions on the album. So if someone comes in, if you're coming in with a band and I'm the engineer, I figure out what your setup is, what sound you're going for. I put the mics up. I make all these sonic decisions that are going to influence the whole record. The producer might be the person that says, you need to do the take again. The engineer can do that too. Oftentimes, artists don't know they need a producer, so then the engineer has to kind of fill those shoes.
Got it.
As well. But the engineer really is in charge of the sonics of the album and the technical aspects. The producer is kind of in charge of the engineer and the band and tries to manage all those personalities. But a lot of times you end up doing it. You wear multiple hats, you do it all. So at Sun, people were calling to record at the studio and me or James engineer. A lot of times we produced it just by the need of it without even being asked or paid for it. And I watched a lot of outside producers come in, and I kind of thought the producer was, I don't know if we can cuss on the Daily Memphian.
We can.
Oh,
Yes.
good. Well, I thought they were kind of full of shit. And, part of it is psychiatry. A lot of it, whether you're an engineer or the producer, a lot of it's being a cheerleader. But I saw a lot of, if you see a couple bad producers, you almost don't want to be a producer because they're not listening to the artist. And as the engineer, you're in this weird role where you're working for the producer, but you're also working for the artist. And so I could tell, because all I did was watch the artist, they're not happy or they're uncomfortable or you're not listening to them. They don't feel like they're being heard. And the producer might be pushing their thing. And you're stuck in the middle where like we're not getting what we need to get, but I've got to work for these two elements. So it's a hard thing to navigate. So for a long time, I didn't want to produce. I'm like, I just like engineering. And then as more and more time got on, I would help people produce from this way of coming from the engineer aspect, but also the cheerleader aspect. And then I did produce a couple of things that, like Margot Price's first album, that started getting a lot of attention. And so I got more calls to produce. And that's when I felt like maybe I could do this in my way. I figured a way I could do it where I was helpful.
And that was roughly when that you started doing more producing?
I produced Margot, I think, in 2014. The record didn't come out till I want to say 2016. But I really started producing about 2010 when I became the head engineer at Sun. But it was really without being asked. It was just, I think now I see I was producing. At that time, I thought I was just being helpful. Or not helpful, depending on what the artist would say. But then I started enjoying it more, and I was more open to doing that. But still, to this day, I think a lot of people transition to the producer, like going from the cameraman to director. A lot of people don't want to go back to being a cameraman. I love still just engineering for somebody.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to produce everything. I love doing whatever.
Yeah.
And then the mixing is the final process. So once you've tracked a song, it's all these tracks. The mixer or mixing stage is when you put all those elements together and finish it to a stereo file.
We'll talk a bunch more about it. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping. We're here, if you joined us on radio, we're here with Matt Ross-Spang in his studio, Southern Grooves here in Crosstown. It's part one of a two-part conversation. We'll do the second part next week. And again, if you missed any of it, you can get it at Daily Memphian or at WYXR or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, though, let me just do the housekeeping and say, I'm Eric Barnes. The Sidebar airs here on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30, focused on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. Not just a radio show, though. It's one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Behind the Headlines podcast. We periodically do a politics podcast, On the Record, with Bill Dries or Sam Hardin, the Memphis Grizzlies podcast with Chris Harrington and Drew Hill, and our food podcast, that Sound Bites, that Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield have been doing, and soon Jennifer Chandler, when she joins us, will be a part of doing the Sound Bites podcast. So the Sound Bites also airs on WYXR every Thursday at 11, right before the Sidebar. And again, all of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I should mention also with WYXR, you can get not just these shows, but all the shows on WYXR, music, talk, all of them are archived. Go to WYXR.org or download the WYXR app and support WYXR. It's nonprofit, listener-supported radio. Become a member, do a donation. You can do that all on the website. And Daily Memphian is also a nonprofit, the largest newsroom in the area. So if you're not a paid subscriber, do consider becoming one. That's really how we support things at the Daily Memphian. Become a subscriber at dailymemphian.com. Coming up on the Sidebar, besides part two with Matt Ross-Spang, we've also got Jacques Osmo, who's been a friend of the show and has launched a cool new program about music and healing and health through through UT Health Science Center. We'll talk to him about that and some of the work he's done. We've also got Rose Smith coming on from the Brooks. Recently did a show with a couple folks involved with local craft brewery, including Andy Ashby from Memphis Made. But we talked about a lot of brewery and the whole sort of evolution of breweries and craft brewing in Memphis. We also did a show with on Opera Memphis and their recent performance. And I mentioned, last bit of housekeeping, behind the headlines. This week we've got Scott Morris, Dr. Scott Morris from Church Health coming on. And next week we've got DA Steve Mulroy. But again, we're here with Matt Ross-Spang in his studio, where you do all the producing and engineering and mixing all in here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In all these various rooms. I'll do a terrible job, but there's if people have ever seen a photo or archive footage of anything from the Beatles or the Dave Grohl series Sonic Highway, it looks like it's been here forever, but it's 3 years old. Yeah,
that was something that I knew how aesthetically I wanted it to look. It came out better than I ever could have imagined, but it feels like it's been here for a long time without having. Previously, I worked at Sun for 11 years. I worked at Sam Phillips. Worked at Fame and Muscle Shoals, all these places that have all this history. And you kind of work there and it can be intimidating because there you see a picture of Otis Redding or Elvis Presley. But it's nice to have a studio that feels like it's been here this whole time, but doesn't have this extra weight to it. It's like a new place to create. You make your own thing without worrying about something else. So.
Do you still produce and mix at other people's studios if invited or if the artists, I assume that happens.
Absolutely. Now that people see this, they do all love to come here. And being in Crosstown is one of the most amazing parts and one of the biggest intrigues for me to put a studio here was most studios were built in not the best areas because that's all they could afford. And then maybe the area does get better, maybe it doesn't. But, you're in the studio for 16, 18 hours a day.
Right.
There's times where you need to get out, or there's times where if you think of a band and maybe I'm just working with the singer or the guy's got to do a guitar solo. Well, all the other guys are staring at him through the glass, hurry up. We want to do the next thing. It can be in the way. So they need to be able to go somewhere. Most studios, there's nowhere to go. This place has all these amazing amenities and the bands stay here on the 10th floor. There's apartments. So last band had joked it was like the coolest cruise ship. They never had to leave,
and as someone who lives in Crosstown and has for 6 years, I don't think I've been outside today because I didn't go to our regular office. I stayed in, and then suddenly I'll look up and it's 6 o'clock. Well, it is a little cruise ship.
You see my studio tan, but
right.
But that has been such a positive for the studio. Also, and I'm dodging your question, but. Crosstown, when I first came over to maybe think about building a studio, the first thing I saw about the building, which was the most important to me, was Crosstown feels like it's for everybody. It doesn't matter race, sex, age, whatever. This place, when you come in, you immediately feel that this isn't too nice of a place for some people or not welcoming. And so for musicians, I work with everybody, anybody and everybody. And so for them to walk into the building, they have to feel like that. And so that was the biggest positive for me. And I've already forgotten your question that I didn't answer.
No. Those are all questions I would have asked if I hadn't. You're working at other studios. So you'll go to other places. So a band has a preferred studio or you're maybe an engineer with a different producer. All that kind of stuff is still part of your life?
Oh, absolutely. I made 2 records with St. Paul and the Broken Bones, and that's a large band. And they're mostly from Birmingham. There's 10 of them and 1 of me. So the first record we did together, they had sent me these demos and they sounded really cool. They wanted to experiment, and it wasn't, for what they wanted to do, we didn't need some fancy space. And the little studio they had used in Birmingham, the stuff was sounding good. And this was right at COVID and was bring 10 guys up here and try and get hotels for 2 weeks or bring me down there. And I'd never worked in Birmingham, so it was exciting for me. That was before I had this place. Obviously, my first wish is you come here. Sure. But Alabama offers a really incredible tax incentive now for music recording. So the Blind Boys of Alabama, we talked about doing it here, but because of this tax incentive, they got up to 30% of their budget back by recording in Alabama. Yeah. So we went to Muscle Shoals, and they already love it there. But there's reasons like that, and every time I work somewhere else, I learn a lot, and so I'm always excited to go somewhere else and hear something and do that.
What's the you don't, unless you want it, you don't need to name names because I'm not trying to be gossipy, but I'm just curious. A session at this point in your career, a session goes bad. Why? Whether it's here or somewhere else. Or does it just, I'm sure it happens one way or another.
I usually don't have anything bad. There, that's an interesting question because I can't think of. Maybe I'm bad. Maybe I'm naive.
No. That's a fair response. I mean,
well, I think you can determine bad in different ways. Records don't sell like they used to, so you put a lot of effort and time in this record, and you don't see that. Most records now, it used to be you get a press and there'd be sales and there all these things. Nowadays, as you know, with the news, in an hour something else happens, everything else is forgotten, and so records kind of come out and then just kind of dissipate, and then they may come back again, or they take a while to find out. So that's really. To me, the hard part is how much time and effort we spend on these things, and then they don't have the same acknowledgement now, which you can determine is good or bad as far as like a release goes.
Yeah.
But in the studio, some artists know exactly what they want. Some people have, like we call it demoitis, where they've worked on the song at home, they've only heard it one way, and then they get in the studio, they might have new musicians or their band, and they're not really willing to explore other avenues. They just want to recreate what they've listened to. And that can be good and bad. And then there's also times where artists are afraid to speak up and they let the other musicians, maybe or the producer engineer, push them into an avenue they didn't want their record to go, but they didn't say anything till it's too late. And then you find out later, like they don't like the record because they did this or that.
Yeah.
It's very rare that I've had that experience, but there are times where you just come in and something's not clicking that day. And you got to really work hard to it or come back to it and stuff. But those can be few and far between.
To the first part, like that whole thing of the album coming out, and it has been, it's interesting that albums themselves have kind of come back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I pre-ordered Serena, a mutual friend, and you produced that album. It was kind of cool to pre-order. I think I have the whole thing on. She sent it to me as, MP3 files, and I'm guilty of constantly listening to music that way.
Yeah.
But it's super cool to get this physical album,
Yeah.
and that has become more popular. And where is it? Japan? I think I heard some crazy stat that CD sales are on the rise in Japan. Like that physicality of the music that you and I at least grew up with. I certainly grew up with.
Yeah.
Some older than you. I mean, I do miss that. And all the liner notes and the album art and this kind of sense of like the physicality of it.
Yeah. The album sales of vinyl has gone up. I was kind of speaking universally of just vinyls, digital together. But album sales have gone up every year for the last 15 years. And it's one of the best ways for artists to make money these days. Especially here in Memphis, we should be very proud of vinyl because we got the great Jeff Powell who cuts the vinyl records here in town, he cut the world's most expensive rare record, the Bob Dylan that sold for $1.8 million. Jeff cut that. He worked on that for a year. And then we have Memphis Record Pressing, which is one of the largest record pressing plants in the world. And is one of the few that has the quality control and ability to do like Beatle records and stuff. And so vinyl has always been a huge part of Memphis and still is. I mean, I think the record pressing hired 300 people last year. So it's a big industry, and it's for us, and this is another great tie-in to being here at Crosstown is the listening lab next door.
Yeah.
So I think people sometimes don't understand, but like I might work on one song I might work on for 16 hours where I just listen to one song over and over and over again. I might just be listening to the kick drum or the bass guitar for a while, and I come back to it and I work on the next. We work on these things. Some go fast, some take a long time. And, after a long day, you're just beat down or you didn't think you did a good job because it's being creative. But when I walk next door and I see all the kids from Crosstown High in the listening lab listening to vinyl, it is this like resurgence of like, this is why we're doing this. These kids are finding these vinyl records. It's so cool to see them experiencing it. And I don't remember the exact test. My friend Andrew Sheps did this amazing Google talk on basically audio fidelity and how it's changed and all these things. And one of the things they did a test on, I forget who did the test, it was some scientists, but they played music for kids. And the kids sat in a room, they played songs on MP3s or digital, and they played vinyl. The kids didn't know what they were playing on. They were just listening. Right. The kids that listened to the digital audio got bored within like 10 minutes. Yeah. And then within 30 minutes, they had headaches. The kids that listened to vinyl stayed for hours, didn't complain, was totally engrossed in the music. Wow. And they don't see what they're listening to. They just are listening. But there is a disconnect in there with the format. And so I can see why vinyl and CDs are more fun in a lot of ways. I still have all my old CDs. I still, when I finish a record, like a Serena record, when I get all the mixes, I still burn a CD and drive around in my car and play the CD.
Yeah.
Then try and play it off my phone and stuff. And I just listen to the CD and see what I want to change and do a car listen. And that's still kind of how I grew up, but still important to me in a way.
The car listen, that's so interesting because I grew up, listening to FM. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. So it's all these Seattle, it wasn't classic rock then, it was just rock. And it was before it got, classic. And you would listen to music just out of the rear speakers.
Yeah.
And the long story with my car, but I lost my car for a little while. I just got it back and they accidentally disconnected the front speakers. And so the music only plays in the back.
Yeah.
And it's the most kind of nostalgic feeling of driving around listening to music without full surround sound. It's just behind you. And it's kind of amazing in this kind of cool, nostalgic way.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've got just a couple of minutes left on part one here with Matt Ross-Spang. We'll talk about a bunch more things on next week's episode, part two, which you can get in the podcast feed. You can get at WYXR, you can get it at Daily Memphian, wherever you get your podcast. A thing I always ask people, or try to always ask people, and I may have asked you at the listening thing for Serena's, but what was the first concert you went to? Which is an interesting one for you.
I don't remember, honestly.
What comes to mind as an early concert?
Oh God. I think I've asked this question before and I failed miserably every time.
Right. There's no right answer. I mean, you can lie.
I don't remember the first concert I went to. I don't remember the first couple concerts I went to, but my dad got me into really good music as a kid. He would always play REM or, Sun Volt, Wilco and stuff. And we went and saw Wilco. Me and my dad have seen Wilco a bunch of times, but going with him to see Wilco probably at like the Orpheum or certainly in high school, going to Music Fest was like your big rebellious thing to go. So I remember seeing, 3-6 Mafia there or Foo Fighters or whoever, but definitely like Wilco. And I remember my dad, we went to Leo Kottke a couple times. And as a guitar player, Leo Kocky's pretty amazing to watch, but he was also so funny in between. That was really cool.
Yeah. And a question I tried to ask you at this listening thing we did in the listening lab, and I've asked a couple of the musicians, because I like to ask everybody, because YXR's a music station. So whatever their healthcare person, their whatever they are, I always ask them what's their first concert. And a lot of people can't remember. Other people are like, Beastie Boys or their, REM at the Coliseum or whatever it is. For you, we'll tease it, but what I'm going to ask you, and we're going to do it on the next episode because I'm going to be out of time here in a second, is an album or a song you wish you could hear again for the first time. And I asked Serena that, and she had this really cool, beautiful sort of answer about this very specific song that she now can't hear like she heard it the first time. So when we come back next week, or when you switch to the next part, I'm going to ask Matt that question because I screwed up my time here. But for part one, we're going to finish here. Remind everyone, I'm Eric Barnes. This is The Sidebar. I can't end a show on time, no matter what I do. Natalie Van Gundy, producer, knows this. The Sidebar airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. Again, if you missed any of the show, go to Daily Memphian, WYXR, wherever you get your podcasts. Please do subscribe to The Sidebar, subscribe to the Behind the Headlines podcast, and all of our podcasts. But thanks very much, and we'll see you again next week with Matt Ross-Spang.